Welcome to It's Art, Let's Talk About It, a podcast sponsored by the Museum of Western Art in Kerrville, Texas. Located in the heart of the Texas Hill Country, the museum is dedicated to the preservation and promotion of the American West, especially through the art of the West. In this podcast series, we will visit with artists, art collectors, and gallery directors working in the Western art genre. We'll talk about the history and heritage of Western art, and we'll talk about why talking about Western art is so important. I'm Darrell Beauchamp, the Executive Director of the museum, and I'll be your host for It's Art, Let's Talk About It. The podcast is a member of the Texas Hill Country Podcast Network. And so, It's Art, Let's Talk About It, a podcast. And today's interview is with Vickie McMillan Hayes. And today we're joined by our good friend Vickie McMillan Hayes, an artist, and so proud to have you on the podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Vickie.
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited.
It's really fun to interview your friends, interview artists, and in this podcast situation, because even though we talk a lot, we still, when you throw microphones in the way and all of that, people begin to kind of, I don't know if I can talk about what I talk about every day.
Exactly. So
let's just start off talking about your career. Let's talk about your life, the kind of art that you do, and that whole general conversation.
Well, I think that you really have to start when you're young, as an artist, to really talk about, for myself, my journey. It began with my parents.
Did you know you were always going to be an artist?
Oh, definitely. 5 years old.
And I talk to artists all the time who say, I didn't have a clue till I was 40 years old.
Oh, no. I was breathing, eating, everything art.
And then others, Jack Sorensen, my friend Jack Sorensen on a previous podcast had said his mama got a call from his teacher and said that, I think Jack's a prodigy. And she said, well, what has he done now? She didn't even know what the word prodigy. He said that he was drawing the cat, and the dog from day one. But you knew you were going to be an artist from the beginning.
My mom said that she brought me to an art class at YMCA when I was 5 years old, and this lady who was teaching, she said, you need to get this kid in some art classes. And my parents, I was fortunate. I had parents who really saw and believed in me, and they would take me to art classes. They would expose me to artists. Charles Beckendorf, I remember my dad brought me to meet him, and I brought my portfolio when I would think I was 12 years old, something like that. Yeah. And he was so unbelievably kind. And, my father would teach me business skills, like you need to talk to him, ask him questions. How does he run the business? And I'm like, I'm 12 years old, my dad. But he helped, throw me out there and start engaging with the public and talking about my art and my career and where I wanted to go. And but my parents, they did that, and they also exposed me to nature. We had a camper, and we traveled all over. Colorado and all over Texas, and I was just mesmerized by the colors and the textures, the different textures that are developed, by nature, and just the canyons and the light and everything. So as a child, I was so impacted by my parents caring about exposing me to nature, and I think it has a huge impact on my art, because a lot of my textures are my painting has a lot of texture in it, right. And I think that a lot of that was birthed from my childhood, just studying colors and how the combination, how God created and moved, mountains, and saw all the crevices and the colors and how everything worked together. It was just beautiful. And
I hate to ask, but put your art style in a category, if you will. It's not portraiture. It's not, Western necessarily. Is it landscape? Is it wildlife?
I'm known as a wildlia artist. Mm-hmm. However, when you're working with wildlife, you've got to know the nature right. that the animal is set in. And so you're a little bit of everything as a wildlife artist, I believe. But what am I? Sometimes I'm impasto painting. I'm impressionistic. I'm a little contemporary. It's hard to put me in a box, because I'm changing constantly. Like this new collection I'm working on even right now, I think it's a little more graphic in nature.
Right.
So I'm excited about these pieces coming up. But I think a lot of my style is developed because of my essential tremors that I have. And the age of 16, I would hold a cup and notice my hand shaking, and I would be afraid to even eat or drink when I was in high school in front of people. I wouldn't even eat hardly around people. But I was like 19 or 20, something like that, and I went to a doctor, and he said that I had essential tremors. I don't have Parkinson's, which essential tremors is the opposite of Parkinson's. So Parkinson's, you're always shaking, like, constantly. And essential tremors, it's when you're actually using the muscles. So if I'm laying in bed, it's not active. But it affects my eyes, my vocal cords. It affects my jaw, like my jaw tremor, and it escalates if I'm nervous or if I'm stressed, things like that. And it progresses over time. So in other words, I'm saying that I had to accommodate my tremors because you can't control it. So you have to have a style that is loose. And then when I want to, really focus on the detail of my animals or certain areas, I'll hold my breath and brace my hand and against my body in order to get that desired stroke. So, I think that I had to lean into my disability, which
Right.
I think sets me apart a little bit with my textures and my background. I like to say that, but I think it's, as an artist, you're always growing and you're always learning, but when you have a disability, you've got to work with it and not against it, or you're just going to quit.
Well, it's got to be tough, and I hear a lot of artists who talk about as they age.
Mm-hmm.
You're certainly a young woman, but I know artists in their 90s, and they've adapted their styles. Right,
Yeah.
you can look at the work out on our gallery wall of Howard Turpning from a piece from 1978 and a piece from 2023, and it's a different style. And in discussion with with him and other artists, I think that they lean into it. Just kind of. I know artists who've been going blind for years. Walt Gonski, for example, and he's changed his entire style. And you think you've done that? You think you've adapted?
Oh, I do. And I think it's exciting, actually, because I hate to say that, but it's like I was so photorealistic. And when you study great artists, every single element of the painting is not it's not highly detailed.
Yeah.
Really great artists know how to lead your eye around and not focus all the detail in every single area. They want you to see certain things and experience certain things. And I think having the essential tremors forces me to see large shapes and lead the viewer around and only pay attention really, really at the areas that I want the viewer to see. So it does help.
And talking to you and hearing you lecture and seeing the things on your website, knowing things, I think that's a central theme. You also teach children when you've been teaching your workshops. A lot of people talk about how you just involve kids who say, I can't paint because I can't. Well, no, you can paint. We've got to adapt to your.
Well, and that kind of leads into a little bit of what I do in the public,
Right.
the public arts. I believe that there's always that little kid inside of us, no matter how old we are, that we want to create. We're born to create. And I think that it's whether it's music or drama or painting or whatever it is, we have a desire. And sometimes, these collaborative pieces that I do with the public, engaging the public
Right.
and having someone add a stroke of paint to a large piece that I'm doing with hundreds and maybe even thousands of people on one piece, I can see where when I invite the public to participate in this, men tend to stand in the back and watch the kids or the mom, participate and add their stroke of paint to the piece. And it's not until I get the men in there and say, you can do this, you can add just one stroke to it, it's okay. And typically they're the ones that want to stay and they don't want to leave because that little kid inside of them comes back out. And we all have a desire to escape from.
And you're known around the state of Texas, especially as a collaborative artist, one of those working in those projects. Talk about one that's coming up with Schreiner University and the Western Art Academy.
Yes, I'm really excited about that.
They're going to ask you to do an 8-foot painting and involve students in the Western Art Academy and involve faculty and staff there at Schreiner University. Let's talk about that for a second.
Mr. Schreiner, Colonel Schreiner, is a strategic part of the Kerrville area,
right.
And they are going to be honoring him as a young lad, looking out on the Kerrville plains and the hill country, and just dreaming about the future. And I think that I'm a wildlife artist, I'm a landscape artist, and I'm known in the Western arts. So this is kind of a culmination, I think, of all three.
And for our listeners who may not know, Schreiner University here in Kerrville, Texas, is celebrating their 100th anniversary.
Yes.
And so there's lots of things going on this year. This is one of those programs that you're going to be able to work with Dr. Don Frazier and the folks at Schreiner University to make happen. And that seems exciting.
I'm really excited. I'm going out to the property where he had his land here in Kerrville, a big portion of it, and I'm going to paint in plein air. And I don't know if anyone knows what plein air is. Plein air is actually where you go out and you sit and you capture whatever you see in that moment. And typically it's about an hour and a half that I paint a painting, and whatever happens. And if it's raining, you paint that. If it's hot and blazing, you capture that. So, but that's something that was in the time period where Monet and Van Gogh and all of them, that impressionism was birthed out of plein air painting, which is, I think, crucial to my art in particular, because it's not until you get out in the field that you can see how light bounces
I'm going to
around.
attribute it to Monet, but I think it was Monet who said, anybody can paint in the studio.
Oh, yeah.
You can take your time, and it's when you're forced to face the elements, and do all that it brings out the artist in you.
Yeah, I've faced quite a few, like in Africa when I've painted.
Let's talk about your travels, because that's important. I know to your work, you've traveled the world painting.
I have, yeah.
And Africa comes to mind. A lot of your work I see are some of the great herds of Africa.
I actually spent 5 summers in Africa, and I traveled there many times. I've been to South Africa, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Uganda, Malawi, and actually, to kind of back up just a little bit to move forward, I actually went to art college, and then I got married, and I was in the ministry for a long time, and then I had children, and so art was kind of on the back burner a little bit because I was raising kids and stuff. And it wasn't until I went to the mission field in Africa and got to spend time with people on the ground and teaching them art, and people that were less fortunate, just how to explore art and use the tools that they had, whether it was charcoal or banana leaves, and drying them. So I would experience all this stuff with them, and it came back out of me, like wanting to paint full time and experience just going back into the art world full time. That's really when it started. So I would be on the field, and I would pour into the community at large, as well as painting on the ground, and started doing plein air paintings and photographing. And then I'd come back to the States, and I would paint paintings. And then I started getting involved with the Houston Safari Club and Safari Club International. Right. And I was Artist of the Year for Houston Safari Club, and then Safari Club International Houston, I was Artist of the Year.
That's where I first saw your work.
Oh, really?
Right, yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that. So I was passionate about, that's where really, I would say that my wildlife's really started. I've been known as a wildlife artist more internationally. And then now I've been really focusing on North America, because a lot of my clients, they're like, so you paint this, but what about a bear? What about this? An elk, So I love doing those pieces for my clients. And but Africa was very, very influential, and living there and the summers and really taking it all in. It was just very special.
And you're traveling a lot around the United States now,
I
painting.
Painting
as well.
Going to the Broadmoor Gallery, and this summer going to be there for a month, and painting on 3 weekends. So I'm really excited about that.
Not a bad place to be.
No,
it's really not. Something we talked about earlier off microphone is we talked about the role women play in the Western art world, in the art world in general.
Yes.
And we were lamenting the fact that not as many women are being recognized or have been recognized as,
Yeah.
leaders in the field.
There's so many amazing women artists, and if you didn't put your name on it, I think that women stand right next to men in their paintings, and they're just the caliber of artists out there. The women artists are just unbelievable, but it is difficult until you're really walking in the shoes of a woman. It's hard. Sometimes I think we're not taken as seriously, and you really have to be excellent at your field to be noticed. I feel like maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like that we have to really work harder at being noticed. And
what was it that Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, Ginger used to say, I had to do everything Fred did, but I had to do it backwards in high heels.
That's a great way to put it.
Had to work harder at it. And I've interviewed a lot of women for this podcast. How do we get young girls more involved in the arts? Is it a mindset? Does it start at home? Where does it start?
I think it's self-esteem, first of all. Loving who you are, knowing who you are, and believing who you are, and go for it, your passion and your dream, and standing up for who you are, not crying out to the world, I'm woman, hear me roar, but more like, I can stand my own, and I'm good, and I know I'm good, and it's having that confidence when you're talking to others, and I think it's extremely important, whatever field you are.
Right.
I think that comes across when you're talking to people, because art is about selling yourself. You're selling a product, and I don't know. I think other women pouring into other girls is very important. I love spending time with women and younger generation, and showing them the just the skills, and then to have a voice and to speak. We can speak without, being cruel or mean or aggressive. You can just be who you are and be comfortable in that. I think that personally for me, it's my relationship with Christ that is very, very important, influential in my entire career. Because to be honest with you, I love to express who I am as an artist in my paintings and glorifying the Lord, but it's really about relationships to me, and getting in front, when I'm standing in the gallery and I'm showing a painting, or we're selling artwork and all, being there and dialoguing and talking with the public. I think it's so important because I care about people. I really care about the person. It's not just about selling the artwork. I think art, to me, is a way of connecting with people.
I've been in this business 40 years and done a lot of shows. And I think when an artist comes to the show, to the exhibition,
important.
It's so important because I think so many people want to buy art, but they want to buy art and know the artist.
They do.
And, I think that's real, and it's incredibly important.
Yeah, and when
there's a lot of artists who don't get that, honestly.
Well, because maybe they're introverts. I'm an introvert and an extrovert. That's why the collaboratives work really well. I love to be with public and the people, and then I also love to be, in my studio. So I like to travel. I really love seeing the world and meeting people. But you have to. When I talk to kids in high school. I just recently talked to a group of artists in a high school, and I was talking to them about just the journey of being an artist and balancing your work schedule, your time, your money, resources. Where do you go? How do you do this? Because when you look at it, when an artist is painting in the studio, they're creating this beautiful piece. I don't think that the world always sees how much money goes behind before it gets into a museum.
Yeah, one of the things I stress when we visit with the Western Art Academy kids and visitors who come here, especially during workshops, is that this is still a business.
Yeah.
And so many artists, if you're a young artist out there listening to this podcast, you need to have some business skills. You need to learn you need to know how to read a spreadsheet.
Yep.
how to keep track of inventory.
That's what I was talking to my kids
because it gets
about.
expensive.
It does. That's what I was saying. The traveling.
We're sitting here in the one of the workrooms of the museum, and there's a $4,000 frame that's standing in the corner over there. I mean, you imagine spending $4,000 on a frame, and yet you do it all the time for your art.
Yeah.
But artists who don't get it, you need great presentation, you need business skills, you need promotional skills, and you're known in the art world as a marketer. You market a lot. Talk about marketing for a second.
Well, that's as an artist, you're hungry to get in the studio and paint, but the marketing part is it's constant. I wake up and I know my avenues and what I like to do on, I work with Facebook, and I work with, just my clients in general, talking to them. Every time I go to a certain state or a region, I will contact my past clients or potential clients. You're always, because people buy a name. They love the art, but they're also, some of them are buying names. And so when they want to see you, they want to talk to you. So when you're talking about networking and I was saying, like, being in the museum and going there and actually being in front of the painting, engaging with people, that's all in your budget for that painting. That painting is not only the frame, the paints, the networking, the travel expenses, the shipping, That's why paintings are so expensive, because there's so much that goes into that painting being on the wall. Networking is constant. It's, going to the museums, contacting people, engaging, following up, being persistent, being predictable. I think those are characteristics that you have to start young.
I made a trip one time with an artist, and I'm not going to tell you name on air, but it was funny. One of the funniest things is, as we were getting ready to go down the road, he was looking at his Rolodex and the cities that we were going to be going through. Yeah. And as we went through Ponca, Oklahoma, he said, I know somebody who lives in Ponca. Let's call him and see if we can meet for coffee. Yeah. A 5-hour trip took 14 hours because we stopped and talked to every one of his clients, every one of his people. So smart. And that's what brought that to mind. That is such a major part of
it is
of what we're doing, in the art world. Yeah. Final question, final thoughts. Why art? I mean, it's something that we don't need, or do we? It's something that it's well down there below on the hierarchy of needs. We need to be fed, we need to be clothed, we need a place to live. But why art? Why do we need art?
Well, as you know, art is subjective. We've got, I think it's Beauchamp that defined a toilet as being art. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
So, I think we know cultures by art. We experience, the Bronze period during because of the art that's left over. It wasn't written down. As we progress and things were written on papyrus and things like that, then we can have the language or written on tablets or stone. But we know cultures by art. Things are invented by art. We create because our creator first created us. We have an innate desire to create. And why art? Well, art is in this table. It's in a cup that's designed. And, that goes to saying, it frustrates me that art's being taken out of the school system, because what are we left with our country if we are not a country that is fascinated with design and creation? It's not just paintings on walls. It's every single object we look at is designed and created by somebody. So when you say art is a subjective word. But if we're talking about Western art or art in general, I think an artist is wanting so badly to capture a moment in time and tell a story and a feeling and an emotion that someone else is going to look at and go, that reminds me of a place, a journey I went on, or a feeling, an emotion that's evoked. So I think it's critical. Art has its place, and if you took art out of the world, what are you left with? You don't have a chair, you don't have a table, you don't have, it's all the
right.
It's It's important.
Easy to dismiss it, but not not to dismiss it for very long, where the society begins to fail.
You're exactly right.
Yeah. That's interesting. People want to know more about Vickie McMillan Hayes. How do they find out? If they're going to see a link on our website, go out to museumofwesternart.com under our podcast tab. You'll see a list of all the podcasts. And you can go out to the Texas Hill Country Podcast Network, and the links will be out there as well. But one of the things we'll do is we'll link to your websites, but let's talk about those real quickly. How do they get a hold of Vickie McMillan Hayes?
Vickie McMillan-Hayes.com is my website.
Okay.
And then I'm also on Facebook for Vickie McMillan Hayes
Now
as well.
spell it out. VICKIE.
IEMCMILLAN-HAYES.com. And if you have any questions of anything, I'd love to chat with you.
Now, I mean, people out there listening to the podcast, they reach out to the artist, you know, because, hey, I'd like to know more about that. Sounds like a fascinating person. So, we want people to be able to reach out there and find your work, find out more about you. They can read all about your adventures and where you're going, because you have a big, strong social media presence.
Yeah, I'd really work at that hard. Try to.
Our guest today has been Vickie McMillan Hayes, artist and educator and good friend of the Museum of Western Art. And you can find out more about Vickie on her website or ours. And Vickie, thank you for joining us today on It's Art. Let's talk about it.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
A great time.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of It's Art, Let's Talk About It, a production of the Museum of Western Art in Kerrville, Texas. We hope you'll visit the museum in person. We're located at 1550 Bandera Highway in Kerrville, Texas. Find out more about us by going to www.museumofwesternart.com. And we hope you'll join us next time for It's Art, Let's Talk About It. The podcast is produced by the Texas Hill Country Podcast Network.